Now welcome to this really weird part of Jordan when you look at the map. Some people compare it, the country, to the axe. So I am now in the part which, depending on the point of view, is either the handle or the part that you cut with. Anyway, I'm in the weird part, and it's basically desert, in case you were wondering. Yeah, there is a town called Ruwaishid here. So when I was in Mafraq telling people that I'm coming to visit the town, there were three reactions. One was laughter, a proper outburst of laughter. The other reaction was, but why? The third reaction, and the most common, was like in the good old school cartoons. The jaw drop, eyes bulging out. Because there is nothing here. So I decided to come and see if both Ruwaishid and the desert are really deserted. But let's start from the beginning. First of all, we need to get there. So, main bus station, and I have to say, rather modern and pretty. But then comes the famous waiting ritual. 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, and then it's full. When I say it's full, it was a very real local experience. But off we go, and straight after Mafraq you can see the desert, or shall I say, the Badia. So first of all, let's deal with some linguistic issues. Turns out that you have one Bedu, more Bedouin. Bedouin is the plural here, and both the word Bedu, or Bedouin itself of course, and Badia come from the supposedly old Arabic Badu, which was one of the expressions for desert, but not desert as we very often have in our minds. It's just sand and nothing else. Badia is kind of a semi-arid desert where you can actually live, and that's pretty much what you're seeing at the moment. There is life in this Badia. There are towns, villages. It's not like there's many of them, but obviously life here is possible. And that's pretty much 1 hour after Mafraq, and then 2 hours more and you've got this. No more kinda sandy desert, you're getting pure basalt here. Well, after the introduction, I guess it comes as no big surprise, but let me tell you this, I did feel like I'm on the moon. No more villages, no more towns. And yet there must be some life here. So we're gonna look for it, but before we do, almost arriving at our destination, let's have a bit of geography. Saudi Arabia, 80 kilometers. Iraq, 80 kilometers. Syria, I think not even 50. In other words, we arrived in Ruwaishid, and that little geographical introduction is there to show you that we are in a border town. Of course you may say, wait a second, 80 kilometers, that's on the border town. Well, here it is, 80 kilometers of nothing. This is the last town, it is a border town then. And here's the thing, border towns have very specific ambience. First thing when I arrived, decided to go to a UN guest house. According to Google Maps, there was such a place, thinking they're gonna speak English, they're gonna help me get by with all the things I wanted to talk about. Fantastic. So went straight there. Turns out Google Maps was wrong, private backyard, so I went away. 5-10 minutes later, the head of the household got up with me asking what the hell I was doing in his private yard. So of course I did excuse myself and explained everything, so in the end it's all fine. He actually gave me a bit of a tour around the place, so it's all good. But that reminded me very quickly of where I am. It is a border town, and ambience in such places is very tight and close. So there's no way I'm gonna hang around town with a camera. Actually, there's no way I'm gonna hang around the town without camera either. So I'm left with the main road. So that's one issue. Second issue, because this UN guest house isn't there anymore, I did not find anybody speaking any decent English. And here's a very good example of what I mean. I think what he meant is spelled a bit differently. Anyway, two issues already straight up. So I am left with the main road. Enjoy then what we have there, 2 kilometers of car and truck repair workshops. This place is not simply the last town before the Iraqi border, but pretty much the last bigger town before Baghdad, I think. And some of the trucks had very interesting marketing. Iceland and Faroe Islands. Well, I guess in the desert it makes sense to go north, right? Anyway, in the meantime, we are arriving at something I can call the center, I guess. So this is pretty much the piece of the road with a government office and a shop or two. And to be honest, the vibe I'm getting here is Wild West, what we know from the westerns, simply Eastern Jordan 2023 version. But there are topics I could not cover because of the language barrier properly. Well, let me tell you about them anyway, a word or two. So here notice heavy military presence. One of the things about border towns, smuggling is always somewhere there. So you will have military presence here because today smuggling is Captagon. This is basically kind of a methamphetamine today, cocaine for the poor. I actually heard some people say only $2 you need to make one pill. You can then sell it for $4. So even poor people can buy it and you have 100% up. But not only poor people buy it. Another piece of information I found, per person, Saudi Arabia people take more drugs than in the US. And Saudi Arabia people are not poor. They pay $14 per pill. So Captagon is supposedly the most popular drug in the Near East. Secondly, people like Assad in Syria make billions out of the trade. And remember the little geographical introduction. Between Syria and Saudi Arabia stands 120 kilometers of Jordan, so there is supposedly a big corridor between Syria and Saudi Arabia. There were even fights between the Jordanian military and the Syrian smugglers, with some deaths included, and it's such a big deal that the king himself came down from the capital to talk to the soldiers. So let me give you here just a little bit of the vibe.
إذا بصير أي اشتباك أنا معكم ورئيسات الأركان والقيادة معكم حتى نحميكم من كل شيء فبدي عين حمراء منكم جميعا والمعنوية تكون عالية.
Link to the clip which lasts a minute and has English subtitles in the description of the video. Just one little thing here though, when we think of narco states we think of Latin America, Colombia, Mexico. There are narco states in the Near East, turns out, as well. Another very interesting topic is kind of connected to the previous one. If you have Amman too big to hold all the people living there, if you have Western Jordan with 90% of the population and 85% of the country being the Badia, roughly 15 years ago the Jordanian government starting investing in the Badia to, first of all, bring people from the west here, but also to try to convert Bedouin to a settled way of life, as many of them still live Bedouin style. And it is kind of connected to the previous topic, because if you have issues with, for example, smuggling, the more people live in the Badia, the easier it is to control it. If you want to bring the military, you need good infrastructure here. And talking about the military, there is a huge air base nearby, but I was told by the locals, absolutely no going there, obviously, no taking photos or videos. But there are investments here. What you've seen at the moment is pretty much empty space, but there must be investment because, for example, there are posters of all the important people involved in investments here. And that's pretty much the first thing that you see when you enter the town. But more importantly, walk around and you'll find some. This is a brand new, proper modern school. My favorite example though, in the middle of the desert you find a piece of suburban America, a little district of little houses and the little streets, and it's all perfect, cut out from a Hollywood film. Still, I thought it's best not to venture in, so let's have a close-up. You can see well enough. They are small, the houses. I would call it desert Bauhaus. It looks very functional, very simple, actually like kind of a permanent tent. So my guess is this is a district built for the local Bedouin to make them feel at home. And because you are in a Muslim country, there is also a little mosque on the side. Unfortunately, I found no information about neither the architecture of those buildings nor the architecture of space. So what you just heard from me are my guesses. But a very important question may be asked. Why would you have such a cute district in seemingly middle of nowhere? It's a guess again, but I think it's a good guess. Water. This little alley, the little forest may look familiar. Well, here we were in the introduction. I thought that's a nice place, shade, quiet. So here it was done. But once again, it is a bit of a miracle to have a place like this in the middle of the desert. So when you saw me walking, it took me 30-40 minutes, and I don't mean from the town, just through the part of the desert. And after those 40 minutes coming here, it feels amazing. I'm refreshed and everything. And we're talking about late February. It is late February, and that's how I felt like. So imagine the feeling of refreshment that you have to have when you come here in August. Anyway, now it's empty. I am alone because it's the middle of the week, and I think for the locals it is indeed winter, but I imagine that they come here during weekends, which for them would be, I guess, Friday and Saturday. And I know they come here. How do I know that? Yeah, unfortunately. Anyway, another very interesting issue is the water itself. Now here on the plaque it says rehabilitated forest. Now the word rehabilitated we would assume the forest was here already, which is plausible. It might have been a little oasis, right? Maybe a spring here. But when you think about it, if you want to develop the place, if you start building new houses, if you want to convince people to come live here, you have to provide water. Where do you find it? Now, hopefully soon, I may shed some more light on the topic. In the meantime, though, let's have a closer look around, and you are going to see that there's always something growing there. Even if it's just a little bit of green, there is something always there. Hence, for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, there is a pastoral economy present here. And even in the middle of the desert, when you're thinking there's no way, look down, look properly, and you are going to see maybe one, maybe two little flowers, but there is always something growing in the Badia. It is most definitely not deserted. You find more of those little ponds when you start looking, and here's the thing though, now this water isn't only for the locals. A very important part of Jordanian economy is tourism, and that's another part of the investment in the Badia. The Jordanian government is trying to convince tourists to come to the east as well. So, let me show you my hotel. Ta-da! It may be the only one in town, but what a hotel it is. Impressive, right? Well, a bit less impressive when you start looking down. Anyway, the main tourist draw is a bit out of Ruwaishit. So I took a car and there you go. It's completely flat. There is nothing for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And for a person who is not from a desert, it is a really weird feeling to be surrounded by pretty much nothing. Well, not nothing. Have I mentioned pastoral economy before? It looks like there's nothing, but those cute animals must have something to eat around here. And after 15 minutes, we left the main track and we're going through the desert now. And guess what? Still nothing. It is completely empty. There's nothing around. So I honestly don't know what to say anymore. Eventually, I was shaken out, metaphorically and literally, from my stupor by a change. Suddenly, there are little hills. Suddenly, there are rocks. Turns out that there are different types of desert of the Badia. We are leaving now the gravel limestone hamad and we are entering the basalt harra. From little gravel basalt stones to huge rocks weighing a ton or two. And this is the very same basalt desert that you saw in the introduction in the Mother of Camels, 200 kilometers west. Now the eruption of the volcano responsible for the Harra, for the basalt desert, must have been huge indeed. And it is here, in the middle of the Harra, that you are going to find the main tourist draw, a little place called Gasr Burga. It is a tower built seemingly in the middle of nowhere, and just like in the Mother of Camels, they thought, why not build from something that we have laying around? So again, it's basalt, not a city, not a town, just a tower, and built already in the ancient times, although we don't know exactly when, definitely used until late Middle Ages. Now, of course, the question may be, why would you build a tower in the middle of the desert, guarding nothing but the desert itself, right? Well, not only the desert is here, but also a lake spreading around several square kilometers, and always here. This place does not dry up. If you have such a miracle in the middle of the desert, you want to guard it. Well, not exactly a miracle. It's a bit of luck. There is a natural spring, but the people who built the tower also built a dam. Damming the spring keeps the water and the lake here. So obviously, any empire controlling this territory wanted to control its water resources. So not simply that life is present in the Badia, civilizations, cultures and empires as well. And people come here also till the very day. How do I know? There is something that unites us across cultures and borders. Graffiti on important historical monuments. But also there is another piece of life here. The local fauna comes here to drink, and because Harra is pretty much unpassable for cars, very few poachers arrive here, so it's a great place for animal and bird watching. That's why there is a modern hotel built here by a very interesting organization. I'm gonna tell you about them in a moment or two. In the meantime though, time to go back to the white shit. And sometimes the desert becomes a highway with more people coming to see Gasr Burga on modern camels. Well, I guess now it's kind of obvious. The desert isn't that deserted after all, right? Now people lived here, they live here, they will probably live here forever. Now, more of them? Well, when it comes to such issues like the development of the Badia, only time will tell, and when I say time, 10-15 years in such cases is nothing. Those projects last for years and decades, so only the future will tell. But in the future, when you see an article about Bedouin culture or the Badia, Eastern Jordan, whatever, read it and see what happens, if it came to fruition or to nil. But in the meantime, we are slowly saying goodbye to Ruwaishit, and we're gonna go towards the setting sun. But not in the evening, in the morning. And guess what awaits us in the morning? Of course, you guessed it right, the ritual of waiting. 3 full hours this time, and I was not the only one bored. The drivers were as well, so every now and then we would go around the town looking for people interested in leaving, and while driving around there was music, there was dancing. I was shy to actually record it, so you have the audio, what you see is my knee. So let's do it like this. When we eventually left, of course from time to time I was recording the road. Let's do it like this then. The recording of the road with a bit of music in the background. Let's party like the Bedouin.
وين نروح نحن وياه؟ امشي واتركني لحالي ترى الدنيا مكفيني. العجل عور الحصان نظرات عيونك تحترف ترميني. امشي واتركني بحالي ترى الدنيا مكفيني.
So that was that, a lot of fun. But now let me take you again to the map. My idea was simple. Here we are in Ruwaishit in the east, and with the bus we're gonna go straight 3 hours to a place called Al-Azraq. But it turned out there's actually no direct connection, so I had to change in Safawi. And then it turned out there is no connection between Safawi and Azraq either. So I ended up with those two gentlemen, kind of a taxi, to take me to Azraq. But not in a straight line, we're gonna go around to see 2 interesting spots. Turns out also there's a third on the way. I was actually wondering why private houses have no solar panels. Well, that's because there are kinda solar panel farms all around the desert, so that's one issue solved. But let me take you now from the religious point of view to the most important life in the desert, something called Al-Bukayawiya tree. Now the story goes 1400 years ago, 12-year-old Muhammad was on his way to Damascus. He sat under that tree, and there was a Christian monk living around. He saw him and said, he is going to be a prophet. So because Muhammad himself sat down under the tree, it's miraculous, survived 1400 years, the only tree in the desert within kilometers. So this is a very important place for the local, and not only local Muslims. That's why you saw a big gate, there is a fence around the perimeter and the tree itself. So that's the religious part of it. Dendrologists say it's an Atlantic pistachio that's 500 years old. But what do they know? Anyway, I was expecting to see something a bit different, because that's what the photos on the internet show you. Unfortunately, that was not my experience, although there are buds. So officially, the tree is alive. Anyway, it is religiously important, but to be honest, disappointing for me. But this is one of those cases when power of religion is more important than anything else, and my private opinion here simply matters not. So let me take you to a place closer to my heart. In the background you see a little hill. Those are ruins of a Roman fort from something called Limes Arabicus. I'll be honest with you, not much is left today, although there's this arch And it may be just a little detail, but how come this arch survived 2000 years of earthquake and the such? No idea. It is impressive, but the ruins are not. Those ruins are, well, as the name implies, those ruins are really ruined. But here's the thing about the limes, the border of the empire here, controlling the Bedouin. To control them, you have to see them. So it's not about the ruins, it's about the view. Enjoy. Absolutely brilliant. Wind in the hair, tens of kilometers of views around, spectacular. And get used to it, spectacular views are kind of a Jordanian specialty. Two details though, the line of the original wall below, so the fort was bigger, but more interesting, in the background the limit between the Hamad and the Harra is very well visible. But of course, we need to continue on towards Azraq, but don't worry, we have more interesting stories to tell. Welcome to the last stop of our Badia trip. It is time for Azraq, a little town of 15,000 inhabitants, and the highlight of the place officially is a castle. And this time it is not a heap of stones. As you can see, it is a proper castle, small though, but does have the feel as it should. Now that's because people were rebuilding it from time to time through the ages. Now why that would be? Maybe it is time for somebody else who is more qualified to tell you the story.
Wissam Saeed, the manager of Azraq Antiquities office. We are in Azraq Castle. It's a Roman castle which built in the end of the 3rd century, beginning of the 4th century. It's, as I told, it's a Roman castle built by basalt stone. It built for many reasons. First of thing, to protect the caravan route between Saudi Arabia and Syria in that time, and the second thing, to control the water resource, because Azraq in the past it was oasis and available resource of surface water, and because we are in desert, so it's important to control the water resource, so they built Azraq Castle close for the oasis. And the third thing, to protect the edge or the border of the Roman emperor in that time also. And as you see, we are in this the castle. It's a rectangle shape. It's about 79 meters by 72. It wall supported with 8 of towers. These towers to make strong wall, and it has niches to throw the arrow, and it was maybe it was 3 stories, but it was collapsed by earthquakes, and it used later in the Islamic period in the 13th century by Izzuddin Aybak in the Mamlukid Ayyubid. And we have inscription in the main of the entrance which mentioned that Izzuddin Aybak built this castle in the 13th century. It has main entrance with 2 slabs of basalt. Each one it's about 1 ton each, and it has only 1 exit. It's about 1 slab, about 2 or 3 tons. The castle contains artesian water well inside it, and it has a mosque belonging for Islamic period, and stables for the horses, and administrative structure or building for the Roman leader in that time.
So, a bit of quick sightseeing done, perfect. We are actually going to come back to both the castle and the little town, because there's a very particular group of people who live here, so within 2-3 episodes we're back here. But now let me show you what the gentleman has in the office. To the right, 500,000 years old. To the left, 100,000-year-old tools. And here is a bit of Nabatean pottery, 2,000 years old. That's what the gentleman has with his keys in the box. Unbelievable. Anyway, he did mention that the castle was built next to water, next to an oasis, right? You look around, there's no water, there's no oasis. What did go wrong? And I said that the main highlight of Azraq is the castle. Well, it's actually a bit more complicated. Azraq is split into two parts, north and south. And the North Azraq castle is the highlight, yes. But in southern Azraq, there's something different. So let's go to the highlight of southern Azraq. We are now in a place called the Azraq Wetlands Reserve. And those are wetlands indeed, which in the middle of a desert is a very interesting point, very interesting place, right? So we are going to walk around here, and actually the idea was originally to tell you about it while walking. Unfortunately today, very strong wind, so you wouldn't hear half of the things I say. So we are going to walk around together, but I'm gonna tell you everything, and unfortunately it is going to be a bit of a sad story, but the story from off. It all actually begins perfectly fine. So you have some water, you've got all those plants that I imagine grow in the wetlands. Well, it is as wet as the name implies. Why would you have wetlands in the middle of the desert? Let's go to our favorite map for a moment again. So what you see across the Syrian border is Jebel al-Arab, the Arab mountain. That's the volcano responsible for the Harra, for the basalt desert. And that's pretty much everything I'm showing you right now. You've got that basalt desert there as the lava flowed in that direction. Today, water flows here as the mountain is covered with snow for several months. And those dotted blue places on the map are depressions when the water stays for some time. Here we have Gazburga, there a little bit simply blue as it's all year round. Now the biggest depression is actually here next to Azraq. It should be fully blue and it's dotted, which means the water isn't there for the full year. Now something went wrong here obviously, and actually you can see it as you keep on walking. Suddenly there's plenty of sand. Why so much sand in the wetlands? Well, let's go back to the middle of the 60s. It should look like that. And if that's not enough, when you look here, well, it looks fine at first glance, as we do have some trees and bushes and so on. So it actually does look fine, unless you have a photo to compare. Again, middle of the 60s. This is the very same spot. So what went wrong?
The Royal Society for the Conservation of Nature is a non-governmental organization devoted to conservation of Jordan's wildlife. Established in 1966, the responsibility has given by the government of Jordan to protect the natural heritage of Jordans. We have here Azraq Wetland Reserve. Okay, it's very important, it's reserve, but the springs dried up in 1992. Okay, completely. So the RCN worked with many organizations to return 10% of the original oasis. Now, in 2023, we have the 10 of the original oasis, and we working very hard to protect this 10% of the original oasis.
Here you have the abbreviation for the Royal Society of the Conservation of Nature. Keep this abbreviation in mind, it will keep coming back now and then. But now let's expand on what the gentleman said, that the springs dried up in 1992. Late 60s, there's a huge population boom in the capital, in Amman. People need water. So they started tapping into the sources. So the water doesn't flow into the wetlands anymore, as it goes through the pipes directly to Amman. That's one thing. Another I showed you the map. Well, Syria also needs water, so they started, also late 60s, 70s, building dams. Most of the water doesn't flow into the wetlands here anymore, it stays in Syria. Two main reasons, with the third. Both Azraqs, north and south, keep on growing as well. And people also here need water, so they started digging illegal wells. And there are supposedly today 500 of them. You combine all those things, and in 1992 wetlands were not wet anymore. They dried up, like literally they disappeared from the face of the earth. And there are several issues with it. One of them is migratory birds had this place as one of the main stops between Europe and Africa. Millions of them. Still, late 60s, they counted one day 347,000. In the year 2000, they counted 1,200. So it's a ecological catastrophe. So in order to avert it, they decided to recuperate 10%, which is fantastic. But here's the absurd bit of it. Amman is pumping water back, as you can see here. So they're pumping water back, 2 million cubic meters of water every year, but they take it from here in the first place. And I also read information that 40% of the pipes are leaking, so sending it there and back again, they wasted. So it is in the end a very sad story. Until the very day, 25 to 35% of water in Amman comes from the wetlands. So I said to myself, I will not shower in Amman. Spoiler alert, I did shower, but I felt guilty about it. So let me take you now for a moment again to the Azraq castle in the northern part. Now what you see in front of you looks a bit like a desert, right? Well, let's go straight there now, and you will have no doubts. It does look like a desert. It is actually a bit of a depressing sight, knowing how it should look like. Here you go, middle of the 60s again. Unfortunately, I did not find a photo with the castle and the water. This is taken next to the castle. Now here's the castle, but no water. You do have palm trees, but just trust me, there should be water here almost all the way to the castle walls. So it is only when you look back at the old photos that you understand why the name of this place is Azraq. It literally means blue. I am afraid that the place has to change the name now. Blue is only on photos from not even 60 years ago. But for me the most powerful symbol was a place next to the wetlands, and what I got were little sandstorms. So you did have wetlands, and now all that's left is dust and fundamentalists. Fortunately, that's not completely true. Let's get back to my friend from the RSCN.
The Royal Society for the Conservation of Nature work with the local community to bring the support for our program. Okay, we try to develop nature-based businesses for people who living around the protected area.
For example?
For example, we have workshops here, we have tourist programs, many activities. We have agreement with the local community. Some visitors while the trail visit this house and to have a brunch meal, okay, to know about the Druze people and the Chechen people culture.
What? The Druze? The Chechens? My god, we are going to have to come back to both Azraqs and talk more about it. So we will. In the meantime, thumbs up for my friend. He was very nervous about his English skills, but I think he actually did just fine. Now what he does normally, he's a manager of a very interesting place, the Azraq Lodge. It's a very eco-friendly type of hotel, and the RSCN has such places now in many important reserves. So here's the one next to the wetlands. What you also saw back in Gasserburga near the little lake was another lodge of Deas. They win plenty of eco awards and such, unfortunately a bit too expensive for us. Now here's an interesting detail. I thought that's a shield against the wind, but it's a shield against the neighbors. Right next to the lodge, a huge military airbase. And suddenly we are back in Azraq North, because it is time to leave it. Of course, the ritual of waiting, that's what you're seeing actually. But it's only 45 minutes, not bad. Most importantly though, I hope that now, after this episode, you will agree with me that the desert isn't very deserted, is it? It has plenty of interesting stories to tell. As promised, we are going to revisit both Azraq North and South in the near future, but now I'm gonna go straight to Amman. Well, not really straight, but in Amman I am going to reunite with Vicky, and we are going to show you Amman together. And prepare, as there's gonna be history, culture, art, plenty of interesting places to visit. It is going to be a bit of a wild ride. So now, do take some rest after this long episode, and I am going to see you very, very soon.